Good morning, Cedars. Hey, hope you are having a great 4th of July weekend, however you're celebrating that or wherever you're celebrating that. Glad that you are joining us online to meet with us this morning, and glad you are here, wherever your here is. First of all, I want to say sorry for those of you who tried to connect in online last Sunday at 9:30 and had the technical difficulties. Hopefully you saw that was put up for broadcast later that morning, but we had some technical difficulties that we just couldn't overcome. With that, as we discussed in staff this week, are trying this a little bit different today. So if this is being broadcast the way we discussed in staff, you'll notice a couple differences. One is the chat room that is normally available to you is not there. But what we do have, and you should see down below if you're watching this in YouTube, there's an area to make comments. So there's a place to comment there. So you can go ahead and comment there. It will be a different environment than how we've done chat the last several months. But this is a workaround that we're trying this Sunday to see if that is the best solution. So with that, let me pray, and then we're going to jump into the service for this day and meet with God. So let's pray, and then we'll do that. Father, thank you. Thank you for the ultimate liberty that you bring, the ultimate independence that we have from sin because of your work on the cross. And so we thank you for that. I thank you for that. I pray that our hearts are open, our spirits are ready to meet with you as we worship here this morning. God, thank you for all that you do, and we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my tomb till I met you. And you called my name. I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness to your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness to your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul. was heavy, my chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan, and you called me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing, and your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open, just when you call my name. I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day.
Hello, my name is Sam Miller, and I work with the youth here at Cedars Church, and I've been given the opportunity to speak to you today. And given that opportunity, I want to take time to honor the seniors who have been a part of the ministry of Cedars Church. And now their honors have been a little more muted this year because of the shelter-in-place order. So it seems appropriate to really highlight their virtues and to use them to kind of help us teach through this passage in 1 Peter. So if you'll pray with me for the seniors and also just pray with me for this message, we'll get started. Father, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth, online, as it is in heaven. Give us what we need today. And specifically, I want to pray for the seniors who have been a part of the ministry of Cedars Church and Community Church. I pray that they would be honored today, but also challenged to walk in character and to hope in Christ. In the name of Jesus Christ, I ask these things. Amen. In this age of distancing and of online learning, it seems like words spoken can be more of a liability than a pastoral ministry. And I want to sort of overcome that challenge today. So I really pray that we'll overcome the challenge of distance, the challenge of technology, and sort of the challenge of misunderstanding, and that you can understand with me this passage in 1 Peter chapter 3. In order to best facilitate that, I thought it would help you to know what I intend for you to experience over the next 30 minutes. First off, I want you to be encouraged. We're going to talk about the virtues that our seniors have grown in and walked in. And as I call out those seniors, I hope that you're encouraged. And you're actually going to hear from a couple of them in a video. So that should just be uplifting to your heart. Secondly, I want to know that you're going to be eavesdropping. I'm going to present a challenge to the seniors straight from our passage in 1 Peter chapter 3. And hopefully that'll be mutually beneficial for you as well. And then finally, you're going to be mildly confused. Encouragement, eavesdropping, and mild confusion. When Jeff asked me to teach today, I ended up with a passage that Martin Luther called the most obscure in the Bible. So maybe some of that will get cleared up for you, but I guarantee you will be confused briefly. So let me start by reading the first two verses in 1 Peter 3, verses 8 and 9. And then upon reading those, I'm going to transition, and you're going to watch a brief video in which we call out the same virtues you see here in the lives of the seniors who are part of the church. All right? Finally, all of you have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. Do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, bless. For to this you were called, that you may obtain a blessing. Jesus is the light of the world, a light we desperately need in our double darkness of sin and ignorance. But no individual can adequately convey the character of Christ. And so it takes a constellation of virtues, a community of people to see the character of Christ. And what we're going to see now is just a handful of seniors who have been connected to this church and how they display for us the virtues, the constellation of virtues, so that in a dark world we can begin to see the light of Christ shine through. Take a look with me at a few points of light among us in this video.
Hi, my name is Kylie Sturt, and I graduated from Newark Memorial High School. You may see me around in the children's ministry because I help teach the 4 and 5-year-olds. One act of kindness that truly impacted my life was when I was in junior high and I was part of the junior high ministry group at Inroads, and we fed the homeless in the Tenderloin in San Francisco. We created care packages that consist of things like soap, deodorant, toothbrush, things like that, like necessities. And we also put in snacks, granola bars, and a gift card to McDonald's and like different foods also. And we got to hand them out to people. But we also handed out a flyer for a church service that was happening nearby. And this honestly truly made an impact in my life because as you're walking down and there's people putting a needle on their arm, I mean, it's scary. And for you to go up there, like at the time, like when I was 12, to me that was super scary. And I remember Renee, who, I mean, she moved now, but she, I mean, even like she was scared. Like it's not that they're scary people at all, but just the experience of being in an environment that's so different, I think we would say is more uncomfortable than, I mean, it's uncomfortable and something that you don't expect. But as Brett always said, you know, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so that was kind of a crazy experience for me. But then we were also able to go to the church service, which we got to help pass out things, and we were also able to talk to the people who did show up. And you start to remember that these people are people. I mean, they have lives, or I mean, they're human, they have feelings. A lot of the people will look at them and, you know, ignore them or whatever it is. A lot of people think they're crazy or, you know, they're doing drugs or something, and in some cases that's true, but they're still people and you forget that. But in that moment when we were at the service, we got to talk to a lot of those people that did show up, and we got to hear their story, and it was truly inspiring that these people had a life, and despite all this hardship that they're going through, they're still making it to church, and they're still doing, like, they're trying their best. And that was what stuck to me, is we as humans will often ignore some of the things that we see. We'll see people and think they're crazy or whatever, and sometimes that is true, but these are people, and to really see them and hear them tell their story was amazing. I mean, I was 12 learning, getting this experience, but it's an experience that a lot of people should have. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Gavin Goldfisher. I graduated from Washington High School. It wasn't the year I expected, full of fun senior activities, but sometimes the unexpected can be a blessing in disguise. In Romans 12:21 says, "Do not be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good." I decided to accept what had happened. I continued to work hard because my goal was to finish high school and to prepare for college in the fall. I continued to join online meetings with my youth group to see friends and praise God. I chose to keep my spirits up and to stay positive. I pray that we will find a cure for COVID sooner than later. In the meantime, may we all stay safe in these uncertain times. Thank you for your prayers for myself and my fellow 2020 graduates. Many blessings to you all.
Hey guys, my name is Sabrina Liao and I just graduated from Newark Memorial High School. And the question is, when have you had the opportunity to be loving? How has that affected your family and friends? And how has that shaped you in the person that you are today? And when I think about that question, I don't think of a specific, like on this day I was loving because I faced this kind of circumstance, I don't think of it like that. I think of, as followers of Jesus, we should wake up every single day with a loving heart. We should choose to be loving no matter what. I'm gonna be loving this day and not that day. No, it should be every single day, just like Jesus. Every single person he faced, every single circumstance he faced, he was loving no matter what. And so, just carrying that kind of mindset with me and carrying it always in my heart. If I have like a problem at work or a problem with my family, I just carry that kind of mindset to just always be loving. And so I think that's affected my family and friends because, they can take a step back and say like, oh, hey, Sabrina just faced this negative situation, but she turned it around and had a positive and loving mindset. And I think that is so inspiring and can really change somebody's outlook. And it's really shaped me in the person that I am today because I feel like I'm a lot stronger and I don't let every little thing get to me because I would rather love than fuel the fire with hate and just make the situation worse, like nothing is going to come out of that. You only can solve your problems with love and to come out on top by being stronger. So thank you.
A healthy Christian community should be, first of all, harmonious. You should have, according to the passage, unity of mind. This is unity without uniformity. This is the state of your soul that gives rise to Acts 2:44. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. So I want to thank Ronnie for showing us harmony. Sympathetic. This is faith from the neck down. We tend to think of faith as an intellectual exercise, but here we have faith lived out. The word for guts there is the root word for many similar words to sympathetic in the New Testament, something that you feel deeply. The idea that genuine love is accompanied by deep feeling. And I want to thank Brianna for showing us sympathy, what that looks like. Now, this is brotherly or sisterly love. This rich biblical idea of loving people like they are part of your own family, this word Philadelphia that we have as a city name in the United States derives from this Greek word, which has rich biblical history to it. And it's just calling us to love our faith community as if they were family. And I want to thank Sabrina for showing us this kind of sisterly love. Next, we have tender-hearted or kind-hearted. This is an uncalloused heart still capable of pity. A life of following Jesus will take its toll on your heart. It just will. If you wear your heart on your sleeve, you'll get sort of used and abused over time. But just like Laura called out a couple weeks ago, the life of Corrie ten Boom is an example for us of how to not have your heart be calloused by the events in your life. And your actions and even your emotions will follow from your will. If you choose to feel, if you choose to forgive, if you choose to have pity, then you can live a kind-hearted life. And I want to say thank you, Kylie, for showing us this kind of kind heart. Next, you have humble. Proverbs tells us that it's a humble spirit which will obtain honor. Jesus tells us that the poor in spirit shall be blessed. Peter actually just lists a humble mind in a virtue list. If you look through any ancient list of virtues from the first century or from before, you'll see that the honor-shame societies in the ancient world never listed humility as a virtue. Humility was seen as something shameful. Pride was actually, according to Aristotle, a virtue that you were supposed to acquire. But Jesus comes and flips that idea on its head. And he said, being in very nature God, he didn't consider equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself. And so this humility, when you possess it, is something that you've chosen to reject a cultural standard and embrace a Christ-like standard of virtue. And I want to specifically call out Leslie for showing us humility and courtesy. And then finally, not quite finally, in verse 9, it says, do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling. So this is fighting evil with good. This is very much the words of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, which echoes Proverbs 25. It says, if your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat. If he's thirsty, give him water to drink. So the Mosaic law in the Old Testament specifically looked for eye for eye and tooth for tooth. It looked to restore equality and limit vengeance. But Jesus really takes this further and says, I'm not looking to establish equality, I'm looking to overwhelm with grace. And I want to say thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Gavin, for showing us what it looks like to fight evil with good. And then the last virtue that is mentioned by Peter here in 1 Peter 3:9 is when you're wronged, you don't return, but you bless. Or just being patient when wronged and providing a blessing. We speak a good word, a blessing, a eulogy, not only to those inside our group of friends or inside our faith community, but according to 1 Peter 3:9, this persecuted minority, this Christian church, spoke a word of blessing to the people who were abusing it, who were persecuting it. For the persecuted minority, this was a very real situation in life that they found themselves in. Now, North American Christianity sees less of this overt persecution, but perhaps being the inheritor of a systemic thought in which you think of yourself as the majority, maybe in this world right now you need patience more than ever because you begin to realize that your voice isn't maybe as loud as you thought it was. So I want to say thank you, Camila, for being patient and for blessing when wronged. So those 7 seniors are displaying a constellation of virtues that we see here as the role of the Christian community with itself and with those outside. So, seniors, I want to give you a brief word here, a challenge. You are called by God. Now, some of you may not have responded to that calling. It's entirely possible that you haven't yielded yourself to the call of God. That's entirely possible. But that does not invalidate this truth. You are called by God to inherit a blessing. There's nothing you've done or not done that invalidates the truth. You are called to inherit a blessing. This is the natural extension of 1 Peter 2:10, which says you once were not a people, but you now are the people of God. You once were not part of a kingdom, but now you have been called into the kingdom of God. And so when you're a child of the King, you're going to get an inheritance. And so you've just had several weeks previously where Jeff and Laura and Tim have talked to us about submission. And that submission is something we learn not because we're outside the family, but we're called into the family. And then he wraps it back up here at the tail end and says, why this hard road? Because you're called to inherit a blessing. So seniors, you're being called. Students, you're being called. Cedars Church, you're being called to inherit a blessing. You are part of a kingdom and a child of a king. But I'd like to warn you, it's never an easy path. Peter doesn't lay this out as excellent. You've found Christ, it's going to be easy now. It's quite the opposite. And this is what he says. He quotes straight from some Psalm 34 here. And some context, David is actually running from Saul at the time. He's just feigned madness in order to escape once again a tight spot. And in the midst of this fleeing, he pens these words. The one who desires life, to love and see good days, must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. He must turn away from evil and do good. He must seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous, and his ears attend to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Who is there to harm you if you prove zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for the sake of righteousness, you are blessed. And do not fear their intimidation, and do not be troubled. Here's the 30-second summary. Happiness follows character. I'll say that again. Happiness follows character. So you were called to inherit a blessed life from God. A life of rest for your soul in the fullness of God. It was Martin Luther who said, no, St. Augustine, I apologize to Jocelyn, that the heart of man is restless until he finds his rest in God. That rest comes from being a blessing to others. So the one who desires life must seek peace and pursue it. But even though you would not wish for it to be the case, the means through which you will bless others the most, and thus be yourself blessed, is suffering. God uses suffering for you to bless others. And when you bless others, you're blessed. So the 5-minute version is this. Verse 8 describes those qualities which, when you possess, you are a blessing to the family of God. And verse 9 describes those qualities which, when you possess, you are a blessing to those outside the family of God. And the means to acquiring those qualities, those virtues, is almost always through suffering. So if you've been a part of the youth ministry for any time, or just in general, if you spent any time with Ben Harris, he's probably quoted this verse at you. Romans 5, 3-5. It says this, not only that, and it's going through a series of blessings that you have because you're in Christ. And he lists 6 of them. And he spends the most time on this one. Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame. The road to hope begins in suffering. According to Romans 5, if you're looking to acquire hope, you go suffering, endurance, character, hope. But when I say the road to character, and specifically the road to hope, comes through suffering, I don't mean once. Please don't hear me saying, well, you'll suffer in your teens, you'll endure your 20s, character in your 30s, and then 40s, it's smooth sailing. Please don't hear me saying that. If you read the Old Testament accounts of the saints, you'll see that suffering is not something they had once in their life. For instance, if you go all the way back into the story of the genealogies in Genesis 5, it mentions Enoch. It's a great story. Enoch walked with God and was no more. It actually, the word it uses, it says he walked around with God. Like they hung out together. They walked here and there. They went, around. This is our calling into a blessed life as well, to walk around with God, to have him test our character and to know us well, and so that we can know ourselves well. And then we will have the hope that fills our emptiness and gives meaning to our hardship. Or another example from the Old Testament. Moses. All right, Moses has run away from Egypt. And this man without a country is living in the wilderness, and he's raising sheep. And he does it for 40 years. And at the end of this time, he encounters a burning bush, quite a famous story of the encounter between Moses and the burning bush. And God calls to him from the flames and says, I've got a mission for you. You're going to go rescue your people. And Moses, understandably, says, who am I? Who am I that I should, be sent to stand in front of the most powerful ruler, the king of Egypt, and tell him to release an entire nation of people? And God says, well, I'll go with you. And here's how you'll know that it's me who sent you. When you get back to this mountain and worship me here, you'll know that I sent you. So Moses has a mountaintop experience where God speaks to him and says, I'm with you. And Moses says, how will I know when I go down the mountain that you're still with me? He goes, well, you'll know when you're back. Well, what about then? Well, you'll have to trust that this mountain is more real than the valley you're suffering through. You just have to trust in the dark places that God's promise, you will come and be satisfied in me. And that hope has to carry you between the mountains. And I think that's not dissimilar to what Peter and Paul in Romans 5 are calling for. Your suffering is going to produce endurance, and endurance is going to produce character, and then character is going to give rise to hope. And that hope has to carry you through those dark places, knowing that what you experience on the mountain is just as real, if not more real, than all of the darkness of your suffering. Peter goes on to write this, but sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence. And keep a good conscience, so that in the thing in which you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ will be put to shame. For it is better, if God should will it so, that you suffer for doing what is right, rather than for doing what is wrong. And here's the fruit of your character, according to Peter. People see the hope that's in you. If you can keep your character in the midst of the valley, if you can keep your eyes fixed on the mountain when it gets really dark, and you can act like what is up there is more real than what is down here, then your tested character will display hope. And people will notice. It doesn't say that they'll ask you about your faith, though that should be rich. It doesn't say they'll ask about your love, though they should feel it. But as you suffer, people should ask about your hope. And you should know that. You should have a response available. Like a defendant in a courtroom. Why do you have hope? Well, I'm happy because I'm anchored in the worship of Christ. Back to that. A theologian by the name of Stanley Hauerwas, Duke University, writes this about the character necessary for sharing our story of hope. Seniors, I want you to listen to these words. I think they're especially poignant today. Churches must, above all, be a people of virtue, not simply any virtue, but the virtues necessary for remembering and telling the story of a crucified Savior. They must be capable of being peaceable among themselves and with the world, just like in 1 Peter 3, 8 and 9. So that the world sees what it means to hope for God's kingdom. The church must learn time and time again that its task is not to make the world the kingdom, but to be faithful to the kingdom by showing to the world what it means to be a community of peace. Seniors, please remember that as you step out into a larger world, a larger world slightly shut down in the current climate. But as you step out into a larger world, your happiness will follow from your character. And people will see your happiness, your fulfilled life, and they'll ask about that. But it doesn't occur in a vacuum. Emptiness doesn't give rise to happiness. Character does. So we're going to finish this in 1 Peter 3, 18 through 22. Please track with me. This is an interesting ending. For Christ also died for sins, once for all, the just for the unjust, so that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the Spirit, in which also he went and made proclamation to the spirits now in prison, who once were disobedient when the patience of God kept waiting in the days of Noah, during the construction of the ark, in which a few, that is, 8 persons, were brought safely through the water. Corresponding to that, baptism now saves you, not the removal of dirt from the flesh, but an appeal to God for a good resurrection, for a good conscience, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who is at the right hand of God, having gone into heaven after angels and authorities and powers had been subjected to him. When I was telling my friend back in Ohio that I was teaching on 1 Peter 3, the end of the chapter, he went, "Oh, the crazy passage with the preaching to people in prison." And I went, "Yeah." He went, "What does that mean?" And I went, "I was hoping you could tell me." It's one of the more obscure passages. And we don't have a ton of details surrounding the proclamation that Christ made to the people in prison, specifically the people of Noah's day who were in prison. There are a lot of theories that surround this particular passage, but as promised, we're going to finish here. We're going to set our senior challenge aside and be mildly confused together. Once again, Christ is the main example of the one who suffered. So as you look back through the passage we just walked through and we say, what does it look like to suffer well? Well, it looks like Christ. That's what it looks like. But this passage doesn't just focus on the one who suffered, but on the reality that victory follows apparent defeat, just as resurrection follows death. So again, the 30-second summary is this. Jesus dove deep into the filth that is our world, put the entirety of creation on his shoulders, and raised it up with himself as he conquered death on the third day. And because Jesus' resurrection is certain, so also is our final victory. A final victory that might happen at the tail end of persecution, of suffering, and the development of more character than you'd hoped. But seriously, what's happening here? Well, it's helpful to look at it this way. A lot of people have seen in this passage where Jesus proclaims to the spirits now in prison, this: Jesus went to hell in the 3 days between the crucifixion and the resurrection. In fact, that particular snippet of the Apostles' Creed is sort of parenthetically placed in there, that Christ went to hell, descended into hell, largely because of this passage. There isn't a lot of other sources that point to that. There's one other in the book of Jude. But it seems like a better reading of this passage not to see Jesus as descending into hell to proclaim victory to people already there. And for some people, they see a proclamation of a second chance to those in hell. It seems probably more likely that Christ's proclamation to the people of Noah's day was through the voice and the life of Noah. He proclaimed victory to people in prison, not that they were in prison when they heard the proclamation. They were around Noah when they heard the proclamation. But now they're in prison after hearing the proclamation of the victory of Christ from Noah. And what's great about this is that it's not Noah's words It's Noah's life that proclaims the victory of Christ. According to 1 Peter 1, 10 and 11, the Spirit of Christ was in the prophets of old, predicting his suffering and glory. So it only makes sense to look at the life of Noah and go, oh, Christ was there, proclaiming the suffering and glory of himself. It's always been about Jesus. In placing his hope in the words of God rather than the perceived reality of his peers, he could fix his eyes above the suffering, endure the slander of the disobedient, and eventually, Noah's character was the character of Christ. We too, according to verse 21, need the flood. And unlike in Noah's day, we need to voluntarily submit ourselves, as in the act of baptism, to the flood of suffering. We want to get behind Jesus and say, where you go, I'll follow. We voluntarily submit ourselves, saying, please plunge me under the water, for I desire to walk behind Jesus. I know that his journey to the grave ultimately led to resurrection, and I long for victory as well. I will voluntarily get behind my suffering Savior, for his path is the path to resurrection. And make no mistake, Jesus is victorious. All is subjected to him, and he is calling you. He's calling you into his inheritance. So, become a blessing to others, even through suffering, that you may share in the blessing of rest in him. For our happiness, our rich fulfillment in Christ, will always follow our character. Thanks.
As we come to our time of communion here today in the worship service, I want to reflect on the words that Paul writes to the church in Corinth out of 1 Corinthians chapter 11. And he writes this, "For I received from the Lord what I also pass on to you. The Lord Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke the bread and said, 'This is my body for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' And in the same way, after the supper, he took the cup, saying, 'This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it, in remembrance of me. For whenever you eat of this bread and drink of this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he returns.'" And as I thought about that, first in the setting at a meal that Jesus provided, this backdrop of hospitality to share something so profound, right? That after the formal meal was done, he took some ordinary objects that would remain, in a sense, an object lesson or a reminder until he returns. That he took the bread. He took the bread that was at the table, and he took that bread and he gave thanks. He gave thanks to God for God's provision, right? And then he broke it and he distributed it to everybody at the table. That there was portion of that meal for everyone, right? And then afterwards it says he took the cup that was the blood of the new covenant, this new deal, this new agreement, this new contract that God was making with those who would believe. A new covenant, a new relationship that then he would go to fulfill on the cross. Sharing his body, giving his blood, signing the seal in his own blood for us, for those who would believe. And so we come to this time in worship. We come to a time of taking communion, of remembering, of celebrating. More than just an act of hospitality, but the ultimate act of giving. He gave of himself, everything he had. He gave this gift that we could never give for ourselves. And so he invites. The table is open. Says, as you come, do this in remembrance of me. And hopefully where you are, here this morning and you're watching this, maybe you have the elements gathered for you already, but spend a little bit of time coming to Him, realizing what He has done for us. This new deal, this new covenant, this new relationship that He provided through His body, His blood on the cross. May the Lord bless you as you spend time in communion and then as we follow this time in singing and worship. God bless you.
Lord, I come, I confess, bowing here, I find my rest. Without you, I fall apart. You're the one that guides my heart. Lord, I need you, oh, I need you. my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. Where sin runs deep, your grace is more. Where grace is found is where you are. And where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. So teach my soul to rise to you when temptation comes my way. And when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. For Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. You're my one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you.
Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Turn our eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. Sovereign in the mountain there, sovereign on the ocean floor, with me in the calm, with me in the storm, sovereign in my greatest joy, sovereign in my deepest cry, with me in the dark, with me at the dawn. In your everlasting arms, all the pieces of my life, from beginning to the end, I can trust you. In your never failing love, you work everything for good. God, whatever comes my way, I will trust you. Sovereign in the mountain air, sovereign on the ocean floor, with me in the calm, with me in the storm, sovereign in my greatest joy, sovereign in my deepest cry, with me in the dark, with me at the dawn. In your everlasting arms, all the pieces of my life, from beginning to the end, I can trust you. In your never
Hey Cedars, here are your announcements for this week. First and foremost, if you have not yet downloaded the Church Center app, you want to go ahead and do that. We're going to be utilizing that tool again for more of the communication and things that we have going on as far as signups and being connected. It's a simple tool, so make sure you do that. If you need help with that, feel free to email us and we can help walk you through that. So that's first. Second is you'll see on our website and also the Church Center app the micro communities link. We have space to add people. We are still looking and praying for more facilitators and leaders to step up for that as well. So if you're interested in either of those, you can click on that link to do that, or email myself or Laura and we can help get you connected. But we do know, and we're hearing from our micro communities that have launched, that provides a little bit of a better environment for fellowship and in-person contact for worshiping on Sundays. So that remains an option for you as well. Coming up this week, Wednesday, prayer time at 7. We will be doing our prayer time again this Wednesday at 7 o'clock here at Cedars. So we're kind of alternating. 1 week will be Zoom, 1 week will be live and in person. So this Wednesday coming up at 7, we'll meet in the quad. We'll be socially distant. I know 2 weeks ago, or from this Wednesday, it will be 2 weeks ago, had a great time with about a dozen or so folks that came. So bring your mask, be ready to connect with other people in prayer, and that was a great time as well. And then on Thursday, we are back with our Bible study at 7 o'clock, and so you can join in via the web on that as well. So look for the details on our website. Otherwise, have a great week. Glad you are here to join with us in worship, and trust that you'll have a great week. All right? So take care, and look forward to the day when we have services full-time, and maybe we don't have to be joining remotely so often. All right? We'll see you soon. Bye.